Welcome everyone to another episode of Align, where we discuss a very, I would say, interesting topic. I felt I was quite lucky to meet these gentlemen in the service. And I think what really surprised me the most was how jolly they were. We met during Fleet Week. So first of all, guys, welcome. I'd love to have you here to talk about the Navy.
Thanks, Jessica. This is awesome. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, and likewise, it was a mutual. When we met you, Brad and I were talking. We like to be positive, and it was a mutual positive energy.
Yeah.
So, cheers.
Yeah. So thanks to Fleet Week, here we are. And I was very inspired by, I think there's so much that I learned from you guys just from a couple hours about what the Navy has taught you. And I think that's why I really wanted you to come on board and share more with the world of what the Navy has done for you, for friendship. So I think first thing is, what surprised you the most about the Navy?
Hey, Brad, I can take a stab at that.
Yeah, go for it, brother.
Jessica, that's a great question to start off with, because I will tell you, I grew up in rural Northwest Arkansas, and my dream was to go to the Naval Academy since the 6th grade. And I remember one of my biggest fears was, I was a unique personality. I was enthusiastic. I tried to have a sense of humor. And I was like, the military is very stoic, very serious. You see the movies, it's, hard charging folks. And what surprised me probably the most about the Navy, in all honesty, was the Navy doesn't want to change you. Rather, it wants to embrace your uniqueness. It wants to embrace your sense of humor. And in fact, it encourages it. And I think what it really does in basic terms is it creates the environment to leverage the best of our country and the best of our people, and to make the team better for their individual contributions. And I think the biggest thing that surprised me was, you're encouraged to be yourself, to have a sense of humor. You're encouraged to smile. You're encouraged to build relationships, to joke. And because of that, I think that's why Brad and I were such good friends in the squadron. Like, we were actually allowed to be friends, not just be professional colleagues, but to be friends, to be family. So that's what's probably surprised me the most. Brad, I'll let you.
I'm with you. And here's the deal. You got to think about this. You're in the leadership position, and who do you want to follow? You want to follow someone that you want to be more like, you want to emulate, and someone that's upbeat, someone that's seeing, positivity in the world. And in sometimes a very bleak environment, those are people you're like, I'm dang it, I'm going to surround myself with them. And conversely, it wasn't usually the guy that you saw on TV that's like the hard ass, right? That's what you think. When it comes down to it, and this is what is cool, but it surprised me that the people that I ended up wanting to follow the most, and that I did were the people that were well-rounded, that had a different, were self-thinkers and individualists, opposed to what's being told, like, hey, everyone has to do the same. And we build off that framework in the military for sure, right? You have the discipline that's there, but then you need to bud and break off and kind of be who you are to be the best leader. And you'd be surprised how many different people there are that don't really jive with the hard ass kind of feel. And that surprised me to see that. I really did think it was going to be. So unlike John Rex, I went to the Naval Academy. I was recruited to play squash. I knew nothing about the military. In fact, I was told I would be given a Corvette if I went here. And the coach, they brought me to Georgetown, and we partied all night, and we had a blast. And I was like, this school is awesome. Little work hard, little play hard. And sure enough, it was all lies. No Corvette. But you know what stuck me through? A lot of people ended up leaving because they're like, oh, this isn't what I thought. But it really was the people. And that's what surprised me initially was, as I said, I don't vibe with people that are hard asses, but I'm going to vibe with people that are real, that get work done, and that are performers. That's who I can get down with and perform with. But and I got that through the Navy for sure.
I love that.
Hey, and Jessica, I'll even add to that. Even through the history of the military, even the individual leaders that are more stoic and more serious, they're encouraged to be creative and to think outside the box, or what I would like to say, not have a box. And you look at the history of our military, it's full of people who dare to be different and lead in challenging times. And to Brad's comments, like, he's spot on. And there was one leadership lesson that I'll never forget. It was this Marine Corps colonel at the Naval Academy. And he said, the number one leadership tool in your toolbox is the power of a smile. And he said, because when you smile, it's infectious. People want to be on your team. They know you're going to elevate them, that you're going to inspire them. And instead of having an attitude of, we can't, I hope we might, it's an attitude of, hell yeah, let's go get after it. Let's go win a championship. Let's go get mission accomplishment here. And anyways, yeah, just to add on Brad's point there. So
I love that. And I love how relatable that is, because I mean, even the finance world or in the coaching world, and I think across a lot of people that I speak to, even in creatives, the hard ass, you plateau with them, right? You're not going to get to the next level. To your point, John Rex, about the creativity, thinking like not having a box, right? In any industry, that's so applicable. So I love how that point, even like in the Navy, we're seeing that a lot of similar themes of how you actually get innovation. But you guys kept mentioning about how close you were, the friendship that were built. I was so obvious to me within like a couple minutes of meeting you guys. I'm like, wow, they act like brothers. So can you talk to me about how they taught you about brotherhood, and how that brotherhood has, transformed into something deeper once you both left?
Take it away, John Rex.
No, that's a good, another great question. I think, kind of building off the original point, every organization, and including the Navy, has their publicized core values, right? Hey, these are our mission value proposition, blah, 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 blah. Well, the Navy's is honor, courage, commitment. And, if you look at those words, those are very powerful words. And those are important words, right? That's how we meet our mission, is living up to those core values. But truly what's at the foundation of those core values is trust. And, I could go on to another just answer of what I value as trust. But I think at the core of what trust is in the Navy is, it's about relationships. It's about friendships. And, when we went to this, Brad and I were in the same squadron in Norfolk, Virginia. And I'll never forget when I checked into the squadron, actually, Brad was the one that kind of mentioned this to me. He said, J-Rex, if you want to be a good naval aviator, be a great Navy pilot, be in the books, be a great naval officer, be a great leader of your sailors, and then be a great teammate, be a great squadron mate, and be a part of it, get to know people, and be a part of the family. And to me, what makes the Navy special, specifically naval aviation, from our experience, is the Navy family. And through those relationships that we built, we're not just 9-to-5 colleagues that work together. We're people who mission plan together. We're people that fly together. We deploy together, and our families hang out together. On Friday night, we're with each other. We're a family. And what it does is it builds this level of trust. And that level of trust allows us to live up to our core values, to meet our mission. But I think more importantly than anything else, because of that trust, when conflict arises, we have the capacity and the emotional security to talk through challenging conflicts with each other, rather than ignore them or not talk about them at all. And again, off the previous point, we have a whole lot of fun. And we try to be enthusiastic in everything we do. So anyway, that's just
how else can you get there, right, John Rex? How can you have that trust and be able to talk through very difficult conversations if you're not hanging out with each other? And he's spot on. A little difference. Be a good stick. Be it like as in like a pilot on the yoke on the pilot, or the actual stick for the aircraft. Be a good officer and be out on Friday. AK, come out and hang out with the squadron, because that's where the relationships are born. And because of that, because when you spend time outside of work, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this in their own, if there is a culture that actually does hang out after work, they're going to be able to work through, they're just through the knowledge of how this person thinks. Oh, I know how Jessica works. She likes to hear it this way, this way, this way, ABC, where John Rex is XYZ. And when you know that, you just become more efficient as a team. You know who to put on certain tasks and who not to, and where their strengths and where their weaknesses are. And you get that from hanging out outside of work. And we definitely do that, and it shows. It shows on how we execute, and it shows on how we have fun when we do get to hang out. So
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm always very surprised by. I would say before COVID, a lot of firms in any industry would say, "Oh, I don't want to, you want to, I want to keep my work life separate from my personal life." And there was kind of this taboo or fear that if I bring my personal life to work, it wouldn't be as professional. And I'm so glad to see more and more industries embracing the fact that actually, when you let that person bring their full self to work, you're enabling them to actually be more productive,
Love that.
right? Find more ways to collaborate. Like to your point, it's understanding each other because there's empathy. And I feel what I'm so happy to see is that empathy is reintroduced back into workforces, that when you know what's going on in a person's life, personal and professional, you know how to navigate, right? You know, okay, these are the windows that they are the highest performing. Maybe, for example, John Rex is a night owl and Brad's a morning person, right?
Mhm.
How can you leverage each other's strengths to create the best end result? So I love to hear that obviously you guys got it right earlier than we have in the civilian world. But I think you guys also mentioned parts of leadership, and also I would say when to collaborate and when to, like, be a listener versus when to be a leader. So how has the Navy taught you when to adapt which role?
Well, baseline military is going to teach you, and I really do give them props. It's a very well thought out system where you need to learn how to lead or it's how to follow in order to lead. And you're going to pick and choose as you're underneath different people. I'm never going to do that. Or I love how this is executed and done, and I can't wait to lead this way. That's a good question. There's a video. I don't know if you've seen this. A guy who's dancing like crazy at a concert, just super wild. And it talks about leadership, right? But really, the person that took the biggest risk or is the best leader is the one that is the best follower. And I say that because he's dancing crazy, and then the one everyone's gawking at him, and then this woman comes up and starts dancing crazy right next to him, right? And what's cool about that is that first follower was the one that actually understood and had the emotional intelligence to understand, hey, what's going on here? And they end up starting this movement where the third and the fifth and the 10th person, and then in 3 minutes later, there's a whole swarm of people just kind of going crazy. But the whole point of that clip is, yes, the leader is important, but being able to understand, I think this follows through in like the private sector very well, is being able to identify when a leader is, if you're just leading, you can fizzle out without the right followers with you. So if you can understand, like kind of pulling a Jerry Maguire when it makes sense, and people are going to pull you, do you want to go with Tom Cruise and Jerry Maguire and go start a new firm with him or not? And if you don't understand how to follow, you won't understand what a good leader is to begin with. And yeah, it's just an interesting clip I was thinking about where it was clearly contagious, but it wasn't because of the leader, it's because of the first follower. That first follower is the impetus to make movement happen. And that's such a big part of, the military. You'll see how it's structured that way too. It's the CO, but the XO is actually executing and helping get the action about. So that's
Hey, Brad, I love that analogy too. And I think a couple thoughts actually. You know, in society, I think I'll call it a buzzword right now is culture change the culture, make it better, right? And in order to really, change culture, it requires a leader that says, time out, we're going to deviate. But what it really requires is faith in everybody, faith in the team. And what you mentioned was that lady who just jumped in dancing, the first follower. That's faith, right? She has faith. Yeah, this is the way we're going to go. Hell yeah, I'm going to join this effort. Let's get going. And I think, one thing that's important when people talk about culture change, they've got to talk about what's the team. Is the team on board with it, right? And that first point about followership, you're absolutely right. And one thing, I learned this from the Marine Corps actually. And I think the Marine Corps does a great job of this. The Marine Corps says everybody in the Marine Corps is a leader. Everybody down from a private first class that's taking ownership and responsibility of their rifle. And so if you think about everything, everybody's a leader on an individual basis, personal accountability and responsibility. And then the second piece, and what I don't like to call it followership, I like to call it teamship. What can I do to make the team better and make the organization better? And I think that's important. And I think, Brad, you nailed it on the head with that. And I think, as organizations try to change the culture, try to be ready and more relevant. That's what followership's about. And then one other thing I'll add to that, and my career in the Navy has been a little non-standard. Me and a group of peers and junior officers in the Navy created a startup initiative, and it's called the Naval Junior Officer Council, to elevate ideas from junior leaders to senior leaders. And the whole point of it was, one of our terms was bridging the gap. And the idea was driving innovation through the inclusion of ideas, whether they're to enhance warfighting or talent management and so forth. And what I realized was, and this is to Brad's kind of point about the first follower, the original team of us that created it were ultimately disruptors. But what was required was the group of followers to come after that said, we'll believe in this. There's something behind this. And what was important about that first group of followers, what I call leaders, is they had faith and trust, and we were doing this for the right cause. But more importantly, they were the sustainers. They were there to make our idea, our efforts, our change enduring, so it would make future impacts for the Navy for future generations. And I think that's key as well.
I love that. I forgot where I was reading this yesterday, but they were saying how a leader or your efforts, say you're so hardworking, you're so hard charging as a leader, right? But all your efforts mean nothing. Your success depends on the power and of the hearts, the minds of your followers, and the people who will, echo your ideas and want to follow you. So I think that kind of resonates with the points that you guys are making. And having served in the Navy for quite some time and back in civilian life now, what are some things that you feel like you appreciate about civilian life? What are some things that you think that civilians should appreciate more about our lives? And adding on to that is, what are you going to bring and take away? If you had to name the most important thing you could take away from the Navy with you into your everyday life now, what would it be?
These are awesome questions, Jessica. I love it. For me, let me hop in, because it's what I'm taking through this is this sense of individual responsibility. I know that there's so much that goes on within a corporation and within larger teams, even smaller teams for the entrepreneurs out there. But when things go awry, it comes down to me as the individual taking responsibility and saying, okay, it wasn't all my fault, but I probably had a hand in this. And I learned that through the military, because when you're flying and you're debriefing, we'll have 3-hour flights and we'll have 5-hour debriefs. That's not an exaggeration. It is thorough. And so every time something happens that's positive or negative, I look inward and I'll say, hey, how does Brad Seidel, what did I learn how did I take part in this? And a lot of times you tend to do it on the negative sense. Hey, this went wrong. And I will say, well, if I would have done X, Y, and Z better, I think this might have been enough to kind of sway it to the positive side. That's something I continue to do over and over again. It's been so helpful. And it doesn't have to be military. Everyone is so intertwined, right? Think about like how these decisions are made and how actions are done with everyone working together on a group. You have to understand that you have some individual responsibility to be had in all the faults and in all the wins. And I keep taking it that way, because it makes you feel better. I don't know if you've done it, but there's a big relief thing. It was my fault that this big picture went wrong. And you don't get as mad at your teammates and at your colleagues, because you have some blame in yourself. And it's, one, it just makes you better. But two, it makes you a better person to be around, because you're not so angry and holding grudges. And it ends up working towards this efficient team that we had in naval aviation. And I certainly miss that side to it.
Mm.
Yeah, Brad, I will tell you, like you nailed on the head, actually. Like when I think about the best lessons I learned in the Navy, I go back to an awful debrief of an awful flight, right? Where you pick apart, I did bad there. It was a bad landing. That was a bad decision. Bad head work. That was the worst, one that I hated, because you never want to say you had bad head work.
Bad head work's terrible.
But it's so true though, right? And I think that's what, as I transition, in fact, yesterday was my last day on active duty in the U.S. Navy.
Woo! Yeah, buddy.
And as I say, though, if you leave the Navy, leave the Navy not because you're running from the Navy, leave the Navy because you're running towards something else. I'm sprinting towards what's next. I'm figuring it out. But as I run towards what's next, one thing I'm going to take with me is, Brad, what you just said: personal accountability, responsibility, looking in the mirror. And you know what? It's easy for us to say that on a Zoom call right now, right? 2 years ago, actually, as a senior Navy lieutenant, the director of this new startup initiative program, and needless to say, as a good naval aviator, I was pretty confident with who I was in my leadership, right? And I was asked to put together a study to implement some policies for the Navy. And they said, hey, give us some perspectives from a junior officer rank. And they said, also, give us what you think, some of the junior enlisted sailors would think. And I'll never forget, I said, yep, we'll take care of that. And a friend of mine, she's a GS civilian in the Pentagon, Miss Jasmine Carpenter, she pulled me aside and she was like, John Rex, you're giving input, but you've not even, you and your team have not even asked about the sailors that you were giving input for. She said, you should always ask for people's inputs if you're going to lead them. And I thought that was really a powerful thing that she told me. And at first I said, no, we understand our people. We know our people. But what I realized was, yeah, we do leadership by walking around. Like when I was in my squadron, I'd fill up my coffee every morning, walk around and spend the first hour talking to my sailors, asking them how their day was going. But I never asked them pointed questions of how can we be better for you? And when she pulled me aside and said, you need to do that, I said, you're absolutely right. And I'm glad she did it, because my personal bias going in was, I'm a leader, I speak on behalf of my people. But the reality was, I hadn't taken a time out, stopped and said, actually, how do they really feel? What are really their challenges? And so as I leave the Navy, Brad and I talk about flying Navy helicopters and the teamwork and the camaraderie. As I leave the Navy, my biggest challenge is leaving behind the sailors that I led. And one thing that stood out to me was, we did a hurricane disaster relief mission following the hurricane. I think it was 2017. And we asked our sailors to get on an aircraft carrier in less than 24 hours. They packed up their bags. They left behind their own families, and frankly, in bad weather in Virginia. And they selflessly got on an aircraft carrier, not knowing when we were going to come home, to go save other people's lives and to provide disaster relief assistance. And to me, I thought that was very special, was that we've got a group of Americans that raise their right hand, that volunteer to protect and defend our way of life, but also extend support to those in need. And as I leave the service, leaving that behind is the hardest part, because it's good people. But the lessons learned are invaluable. And as I transition to the private sector, one thing I will say, and Jessica, this is to your question about society, the civilian life. My feedback is, Brad and I have been all over the world. The United States of America is the greatest country in the history of the world. Be proud to be an American. Are we going to have our challenges? Yes. But at the end of the day, what makes this country worth serving for and fighting for, and what we have young men and women across the globe doing right now, protecting that way of life, is they're protecting freedom. And so if there's anything that I would say, is be proud to be an American, be proud of the service members that are selflessly volunteering each and every night. And I think that's important. And the one thing I will just add of what civilians can learn is, you do a lot of great things. And Brad and I talked about the military. I've actually, as I've been talking to people in the private sector, I've been blown away with all of the great things that are happening, all of the great ideas, the energy, the enthusiasm, the innovation. And what I will say is, just as we as service members can learn from you, you can learn from us. And so, a lot of what Brad and I talked about was lowering the barriers to conversation. And so my advice is not advice to one particular group of people. It's advice to everybody of, let's all lower the barriers and let's have conversations. Let's work together. And anyhow, just a few thoughts. It's probably a little bit of a rant there, but
No.
an emotional rant, because again, leaving the Navy has been hard because there's purpose in the Navy. And I'm looking to find that next purpose elsewhere.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing an echoing of empathy and just listening with empathy versus listening to respond. I'm hearing a lot of that. And also what Brian mentioned earlier was it's trust, right? Owning up to, listen, we're human. We're not saints, right? We're going to mess up. But if you want to build trust with your teammates, you want to build trust with your superiors, people below you, or even your clients, you got to own up to your mistakes. I have it in my career. I've never seen someone get dinged, including myself, for being honest and owning up. I see clients redeeming their money from managers. I see people leaving. I see people getting let go because they were not honest with their mistakes and they try to cover it up. And I think more and more now people want to see authenticity. They want to work with good people and people who are going to stand up to not only doing the right thing, but owning the fact and backtracking of when they've messed out, how they're going to fix it. So I couldn't agree more. I always wrap up, guys. Thank you so much with, I really believe every single person has a gift. And if you unlock this gift, you're going to serve humanity even further. So what would you say your individual gifts would be?
I think for me, it's finding, making sure that people understand that there's others around them that are, although they're not the same, that they're similar. And that goes to like the military, that don't like judging the book by its cover, call it, but opening that conversation. I have a gift to help make sure that everybody is heard and that there's a good voice there. And better yet, when you show the empathy, Jessica, like you're saying, and you say, hey, this is where I messed up. Those are the true performers. And those are the people then you're going to be able to help others. They're going to be like, oh, actually I messed up too. And then these things come full circle very quickly. I love that. And that's my gift. I hope to keep doing for people and allowing people to feel like it's comfortable. It's a culture, it's a trust, and allowing them to step up and say, yeah, this is where I messed up today. And it's okay.
Love that.
Jessica, I will tell you, so Brad's probably heard this before. I don't think I've got a lot of gifts. As I jokingly tell people, I was top 90% of my class, so I barely graduated from the Naval Academy, right? So but I will say that I think my one gift, well, a large gift, is the ability to love. And you talked about empathy. To me, empathy is love. It's love a fellow person, love a friend, love of shipmate, and so forth. And all of my success, whether individual or team success in life, has been with the ability to surround myself around people that build me up, don't tear me down, and together we make our team better. And I think that's important. And I think my individual contributions are not necessarily great, but my one contribution of creating an environment, setting the conditions for others to thrive and accelerate the team, that's it. So again, proud to be top 90% of my class from the Naval Academy.
I love it. Guys, I'm so inspired. It's only been like, 20 minutes, but thank you guys so much. Welcome back to civilian life. We can't wait to see what you're going to do next.
Thanks, Jessica.
Oh, thank
Awesome.
you.
Bye.
And beat Army.
Yes.
Beat Army.